you can compare it to either the Coachella or Glastonbury of the creator economy.
Yeah.
You literally had the biggest creator in the world attending, you know, in Mr. Beast, you had Will Smith.
My dad, before the trip, he gave me this like international plug and an outlet. Great, yeah, I'm gonna use it. But I forgot, I didn't ask him how to use it, right?
Both recapping 1 Billion Followers Summit, what worked, what really exceeded expectations, and what to expect in 2027. Leslie, I appreciate you taking the time. You said in a post, and I'm going to quote this, like, it's, unless you were there, it's hard to fully capture the scale, energy, and global mix of voices. But I'm going to ask you anyway, for this audience, can you kind of compare it to something or talk people through, or, you know, what this felt versus other years?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of told everybody it's either, you can compare it to like the Coachella, you can compare it to either the Coachella or Glastonbury of the creator economy, you know, because essentially I think that it's 30,000 attendees. Look, I think there's a great portion from the region, from the Middle East, but it was global in scale. I mean, you literally had the biggest creator in the world attending, you know, in Mr. Beast, you had Will Smith, Simon Squibb, you know, so a lot of very known, high profile speakers attending, creatives attending, but the global reach was more about, you know, the speakers that represented just literally everywhere from Greenland to Serbia to Kenya to, I mean, you just name it. Yeah. And I think, you know, really commending the leadership team, wanting that representation, the representation, you know, to the point that we had to cap United States involvement or European involvement. Like we were very cognizant of saying, we only want this percentage from this particular region so that it's not all US based or not all, you know, British or not, you know what I mean? Like we really wanted that diversity of voices. That was really important. I think gender was also from the jump really important this year. We were really pushing for a more even split. I know at least for the content track, I got it to about 60-40 this year, so 60 male, 40 female, and pushing even harder next year, more of a 50-50. And look, I think certain places that could be a little bit more challenging, right? But I think doing our part as track producers and me being on the content track, that was something that I was really excited to hear, and something that, again, the leaders of the summit, the government itself, really wanted to shine a spotlight on.
You know, it's like we're US based and we can get kind of myopic and thinking like that we're central to, or that we are the sun and everything else revolves around our creator economy. And I think this can be true in other places. It's just, it does show like the global breadth and expansion of what, you know, is possible and where things can go. But when you're building on this is, I think, the biggest reason why I wanted to talk is like, I think, you know, and correct my hypothesis if it's wrong, but like when you're building that content track, you are working with all of these different speakers and all of these different people who exist in the creator economy, and they're kind of telling you and they're signaling to you what they think is important by what they want to talk about.
Yeah. And so really it's my job to think audience first. And look, sometimes I even said, I'm coming to the table with some thoughts, but I want to hear what you have to say. And usually what I would do is we would work together. So really one really good example was, the Creative Explained. You know, he's got a really robust multi-channel strategy around these kind of like DIY food hacks. And so I was wanting to really lean into more about like his creative process. And he was like, wait a second, I need to tell you about how I'm able to achieve the viewership that I've achieved. And he laid out this kind of like playbook of, you know, how he thinks about virality, how he thinks about, you know, if he doesn't hit X amount of viewership by like the 10-second mark, he will take the video down, recut the video, right, based on the data that he's seeing. He's incredibly data driven. So it's like, oh, light bulb. I'm like, we need to talk about that. And then the other thing that I was really focused on this year is having more, right, like how can I get somebody to show versus just tell. So there was a woman, she's like 64.
Yes.
She's a mental health advocate. You know, her students were like, I dare you to go on TikTok and post a video. And all of a sudden she went viral. And through this process, you know, she was like, oh, there's all these things I want to do and learn. She like just learned how to be a DJ over the past year. She's been playing like in LA. And I was like, we're opening your keynote with a DJ set. Or the Mongolian family, who is just incredible. Like they're bringing so much learning to their own people, bringing them to the country, teaching them English. She was like, you know, really have this traditional dance. I'm like, you should teach the dance. Teach the dance to the audience. Like, why wouldn't you do that? Finding ways to engage that's more interactive, taking culture and sharing that culture out, showing that like, I want to teach you about what I'm doing versus just the typical panel. So we had a lot of mini keynotes. We had basically an overarching umbrella of a particular topic. So if the topic was, you know, you're never too old to start something new, right? You'd have Crazy Auntie Anne as a mini keynote, Retirement House as a mini keynote, and then Sprout, who's interviewing a lot of people that are of a certain age that have said, hey, I've kind of done some reinvention in my life, right? All talking about the same topic through their lens, right? Those were the kinds of things that were important when I was thinking about programming. And really, it was a very collaborative process. You know, initially I would have, you know, the kind of the process was a lot of internal people would come to me with kind of speaker racks. I would get on the phone. The speaker would expect that I would have the session planned out for them. And I was like, I just don't work that way. I'm not going to work that way, right? Like,
no, that narrows it, right? That's almost like you're putting an absolute punctuation on what that can and cannot be, and like I get it, right? It's almost like this is a very like in the weeds meta conversation about podcast booking too, where it's like, yeah, but I could make your life easier, and I probably should, and it could absolutely be misconstrued. I don't know how you feel about this. Like, it can be misconstrued as laziness if I don't come to you with that. But yes. I am not going to know your stuff nearly as well as you do. And so why should I be the one prescribing what that should be? It should be a collaboration.
Exactly. And there would be literally like this moment, mostly, like I would say 90% of the time with the speakers that I was working with, somebody would say something and it would just kind of like hit me. And I was like, this is what we need to do. They're like, oh, of course, right? It was just kind of this like, again, I literally had to speak to every single person, right? We had to get on a phone call. Even to the point
multiple
where like,
phone calls probably.
Yeah. And also too, I was like, I don't want to talk to your manager. And like, I would talk to somebody's manager for 5 minutes and I'm like, I have to speak to the person. I don't want to be through you, right? Like I appreciate your input and your guidance, but I think everybody's got their own POV. And if you have an assistant or a manager or an agent, right? They want you to come to the table in a certain way. Maybe there's a PR moment, which I respect, right? I do want to hear that out.
Absolutely.
There's got to be a genuineness to what you're presenting. Otherwise, it's going to feel super clunky and people aren't going to lean in. Again, my job always is the audience going to lean in? Are they going to be on their phone doom scrolling? Or are they going to walk out the door? I need them to think through what are the key takeaways of a particular session and get them to do their best. And there were certainly speakers that were first time public speaking, first time doing a keynote, like, and working through some of those challenges and hesitancies. I had one speaker, she speaks English wonderfully. She's a fluent, you know, English speaker, but she's prefers to speak in Arabic. Iraqi and lives in Dubai. And she was like 2 days before, she's like, no, I got to do it in Arabic. And I was like, I hear you. I hear your hesitancy. I've talked to you. I've heard you speak. You can do this. And I think it's going to set you up in a more global perspective because you're with other English speakers, particular keynote. And I think like making sure that you're with some of these other folks to kind of almost like showcase you in this way is actually going to be really beneficial. And I remember I spoke to her like literally the night before. She's like, all right, Leslie, I trust you. I'm going to do it. And afterwards she was like, I'm so proud of myself that I did it. And I'm like, you did. And I'm proud of you too. And everybody around you should be proud of you for encouraging you to kind of go outside a little bit of your comfort zone. Because I think it really kind of provided her an opportunity to set herself apart in a way that maybe she wouldn't have otherwise.
I'm going to try and ask this question the most simple way possible, because I'm assuming this is just stuff that's built off of the muscle memory of, producing, but you do a good job of empathetically questioning somebody and trying to give them the opposite. But like, for people in this audience, like, how can they do that better? How can you suggest something to someone who probably gets yes more than they get no? And how do you go counterpoint?
I think you have to really understand yourself and trust yourself in that. Yeah. Like, I could have very easily been like, yeah, whatever, we don't have to do that, and just kind of shirked it. But I knew in my heart of hearts that it would go over 10 times better, right? And it would become this talking point for her as she's thinking about the holistic piece of her own career. Like, I knew the audience wanted it. Like, I knew who was going to be attending the session based on who was already a part of that session. So if we all of a sudden flipped to Arabic in that moment, I could see people kind of leaning out or walking out. And I didn't want that. I wanted the support with the audience to kind of give that back to her. So I knew that. And so I trusted that. And so I went for it. So I think it's important that if you beyond your logic, right, instinctively, intuitively know in your heart, like, this is the way to go, you can find a way to just kind of say, look, like, this is why I think this is going to benefit you. And look, sometimes you're going to get a hard no, and you find a way to, compromise that no into maybe a maybe, or that works for both of you.
So accurate.
Because like the reality is, if she had been like, hard no, I'm not doing it, I would have removed her from that session. I would have given her own slot, and I'm sure it would have been fine, and I'm sure it would have been successful. I don't think it would have been like lacking success. I just think her being paired, because I paired her, she's got her own beauty brand. I paired her with Chriselle Lim, who launched in the Middle East. I paired her with this creator, Yo Angelo. He's very young, but like he blew up his like family's donut shop. So it's like not everything. There's different, areas. Dex Rock, who has his own like very successful candy brand in Serbia. Like, it was very strategic the way that I planned the entire session, right? Yeah. And so if she's removed from it, bummer, but it's still gonna be fine and good and probably really good, right? But this just made it way better. And so it's really knowing that, based on like, if you're producing anything, right, and somebody's like, oh, I don't want to do this cold open this way, I think it's better off this way. Either you do it the way somebody else wants, you stick to your guns, or you compromise and you do it both ways and you see what's going to stick, right? And so I think I had a plan B, and I just didn't want to do it. And she fortunately, and look, it also took me, it was very kind of random. Like, I happened to bump into her the night before. She was setting up her booth. The other producer knew her, introduced me, and I was like, I'm really excited that you're going to do this in English. She's like, Leslie, I know, like, I just need you to know, like, I'm really nervous about it. I don't know if this is going to be right for me. I'm like, trust me, this is why I think it's right for you. And we kind of had the conversation, so if you can find ways to meet people where they are, if it's just coincidental, which it was in the moment, but it was this perfect serendipitous moment of like, she's like trying to figure out her booth, and I pull her away for a second, and we just have this kind of like very open conversation. And then she did it, and she was glad she did it.
I think the gift there is being able to be present when you have 75 sessions that you're trying to execute and plan, but you know that like instinctively you have to just be present for 5 minutes in order to do that. The other thing too is I'm kind of hearing and I'm like thinking about, it's like, well, yeah, it's like, you obviously have to have contingencies and plan Bs, and maybe you're putting one extra person on every panel just in case, because you just never know. So it's not going to fall apart if the inevitabilities happen. But again, all these things that go into it, I think people always assume that when you have that many moving pieces that you're just the most immensely flexible person. And I think it's like, well, you can't be fully flexible either.
I would say sometimes there's certain things that, and like, I find that ironic just because I know that I can be a very rigid person in my own life, in my own personal life. And so I think that it's really important that you have to be, because things are bound to go wrong. People are going to drop out. I had a panel with 3 people, 2 people dropped out, and ended up being like an expert exchange between the moderator and the speaker. It was actually a great moment. It actually turned out 10 times better that way than the other way. And so
nobody ever knows.
yeah, and or somebody refused to go on stage, right? Like moments before they're supposed to go on, and you're like, in that moment, I'm like, I can't fight this. Like, and the other person did a great job, and it worked out. And there's always going to be things that happen. People get sick, flights cancel, like, and you have to just on the fly be willing to just move things around, try something new, like. You have to, otherwise, and once it's like, I think the other thing people forget is like, once you're in it, you're in it. You can't just stop the train. Like the train is moving, and you gotta just, sometimes you need to like add more coal or add, pull the little lever or whatever, right? Like you can't stop and be like, no, we can't do it this way. Of course, like, technically something can go wrong. A mic drops, it's the wrong image, like even though you've checked the image 80 times, like, and you just have to kind of roll with it the best you can, and in the moment make decisions that you hope will make it still a great session and a great experience for the audience.
Dylan, thanks for taking time. You said something we worked on earlier this week, that scale was one of the most important things for 1 Billion Follower Summit, but just kind of give your broad takeaways for people who weren't on the ground, like why it mattered, why it was important, what you thought was really good about the conference.
Yeah, I think especially with what we're doing here in the United States, we see the creator economy very national. And I think what 1 Billion Follower Summit really showcased was that the creator economy was so global. You can't even imagine the number of times I was looking at friends and being like, who is that guy? And why are people following him? But that was the ethos of 1 Billion Follower Summit, was bringing creators on a global scale. And I think that really spotlights the impact that the creator economy has, not only on the United States with fans and stars, but also globally with fans knowing, internationally knowing US-based creators, and likewise the complete opposite. These international creators at the UAE and the UK and so on, having that same impact and presence that your Mr. Beast, that your David Dobrik, who were there, were able to have as well.
Well, it's like, obviously, there's no monolith, right? But we also all live in some version of a bubble. So I think when you get into physical space, it can just, you can feel the scope and scale a little bit more.
It really felt like a 2017 VidCon, except with the audience being global. That's how it felt.
Well, the other thing too about the global thing, again, when we don't start thinking myopically, is that there are so many other avenues, angles, opportunities than probably exist in what we're thinking currently.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. I think in general, the impact and size of 1 Billion Follower Summit really felt super impactful. I mean, even the platforms having their own houses and lounges at the conference, and Instagram, Snapchat, Twitch, multiple brands really being involved in 1 Billion Follower Summit in meaningful spend. I think that was very cool to see.
Oh, absolutely. Your panel was called Gen Z Hates Your Brand and Here's Why, which is beautiful, wonderful. How did that go? What was the genesis of that idea?
It was a great panel. It was incredible, and I think we talked about very relevant stuff, and there's just the overall marketing landscape. We especially talked about how a lot of brands are traditional, have a lot of KPIs and OKRs, to where you have your boss's boss being like, well, we can get a creator with 5 million followers for $10, right? Right, and that was exactly the ethos that I harped on, is for brands to be successful, they have to listen to the audience that they're trying to resonate with. We can't have more agencies and brands with 50-year-olds trying to be like, this is how we market to 20-year-olds, right? It's really like, how can we go talk to the people, the consumers that we're trying to market to? I think that was the ethos of the conversation. We talked about finding college students and Gen Zers where they are, not where they're not. And really building on models that are repeatable, sustainable, and boots on the ground, right? Students are at their student organizations, they're in group chats, They're on
Yeah.
iMessages. They're not on email. They're not at your everyday Los Angeles nightclub. It's finding these college students and these Gen Zers who are the cultural tastemakers. I really emphasize that they are the tastemakers of tomorrow, right? Finding them where they're at, because that's the easiest way to reach them.
Yeah, you really shouldn't show up into the group chat as Unk and think you're going to figure things out, right? But I think the other thing too is, did you see a lot of brand people there?
I think there were a lot of brand people, but I think there was more individuals who were building infrastructure in the economy. So it was a lot of agencies mainly. I'd say like agencies, services, brands was a subset. It was a small subset. They were there, but it was more the CEOs of different top agencies who wanted to learn how to really appeal to the brands that they're talking to as well.
There's a couple of competing thoughts I have in my head. We'll see which one wins out. But like when you were mentioning KPIs and OKRs, like one of the things I'm thinking about is I think there is always at least one, if not many more, really talented, really good people thinking about the creator economy at every brand. It's just, and I'm glad you brought up systems. It's the systems that get in the way, right? It's the, brand building doesn't happen overnight. It takes time. And I think we do, correctly or incorrectly, we are in a culture right now where we're like, yeah, just throw that into a GPT and get it done. We have competing forces. We want to do the very quick, fix measurable thing over here, but we also want brand building, and that's probably like it's the uphill battle. I hear brand people talk to me all the time. They're like, we know what to do, we're just not allowed to do it.
Yeah, I mean, that's the problem when you talk to very traditional companies, is that they don't understand how things are changing, how things are evolving, that what they were able to do 20 years ago with traditional television is so outdated to where the same methods can't be replicated or repeated. I mean, obviously it can, but who's really still watching TV at this point? Right. And I think that, 1 Billion Follower Summit and my panel, everything in the creator economy that we've seen so far has culminated into that, is that culture is always changing and it's changing rapidly. And digital is where people eat, sleep, breathe now. It's not on the traditional television. It's not on the traditional radio. Heck, I don't even remember the last time I listened to radio. Right. So it's probably in middle school. So, it's new methods that very traditional companies and corporations with different stakeholders and OKRs, they need to understand that in order to hit these OKRs, you have to be open to change.
It's almost like, and again, like I want to say this and I explicitly say, I am not suggesting that you bring people in for lunch and learns. That is pointless. Yeah. There needs to be something more tangible, but it really is, it's seat at the table. It's bringing in people who understand this and can speak. I mean, I think there's a really big case for people who can understand both ends of the spectrum and who can empathize with those KPIs and be able to communicate. Like you've done a really good job of being creator and on the other side of the business, like you can naturally speak to those things.
Yeah, I think, a lot of social media managers and influencer marketing managers like to say that they think and operate in the same light as, I understand that there are problems in corporate and, and jurisdiction that they fall short on, because they have their boss who's very much who's 80 years old and trying to be like, okay, yeah, we'll pay $50. I do understand that, and I am empathetic with those individuals, but a lot of it is, how can we just rechange what corporate culture and structure looks like so that these individuals, your intern who is in college probably knows a little bit more about creator culture and what prices look like than you do probably. So it's how can we all listen and learn together? A luncheon is always insightful, but it's how can we take it up a notch and really make something even more impactful so that corporations can move with the times as well.
I think the biggest common thing I hear in interviews from anybody in the industry is like, can we get the creator involved earlier and earlier in the process? Because if we can do that, then a lot of things are possible. Because I have this the running theory too is it's like, it's like if you microwave, if you buy something up from the freezer section and you microwave it and you think that's the only version of that food, you're going to be like, miss me with that. But like these all these other versions. Like if you took a little bit more time, if you went low and slow with that, if you if you added depth of flavor, to quote the Food Network, all of these things would be possible. The other thing too is like you were talking about, like there's like 34-year-old unks out there. Like you know, it's not really an age; it's more of a feeling and a mindset. Like if you're kind of letting go of what is happening, it is tough. Again, I empathize, because we don't necessarily have monoculture. We don't have like this thing that's saying like this is the thing, right? You do have to you have to take an active interest in it. The one thing I wanted to come. Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think it's also hard when you have one creator with 1 million followers that will charge $50, $500. As a CEO for a company, now your mindset is, oh, every creator is going to be $500 with 1 million followers, right? Because there's no template, because there's no structure and strategy, because we're in a very decentralized industry.
Yeah.
There's a lot of ways that people can misconceive what is the norm and what should be the norm, right? $500 for 1 million followers is a great steal. Obviously,
hop on that.
Take it, as long as the account is real and doesn't have fake followers.
Also, good asterisk. Yes.
That's not going to be the case and scenario for 99% of the other creators, right? And it's realizing that you have to, be open to the fact that we're in a very unique industry that is very gig economy focused, which is very much the market price of a creator is always relative to the individual creator, not individual to a standard flat tier. And be open, willing to say, I understand that this isn't the norm, but it's a great offer and we'll take it. But if another creator comes in with 1 million followers and offers $5,000, which is 10 times more, it's not because that's wrong. It's not because the $500 is wrong. It's just these creators have different prices.
Hundreds of thousands of separately operating small businesses. And it can get really overwhelming on the brand side. The last thing I wanted to circle it back to 1 billion followers summit, like you were talking about, like there are some people that are recognizable in that room that aren't recognizable to you. I think that is always like this, that's just always the most fascinating thing. Like, of course, somebody's going to recognize Beast or Dobrik. Like, we understand that. But it's the interesting thing about, if you do a couple layers of depth in this field, you're going to find the person who has this niche audience that will really drive, rather than, I think that's the other part to think about too, is, when you see that in real human space, when there are people that are being recognized that you don't know, it shows you the depth and breadth of the industry. It's
so funny because I was at a meeting with a few friends from the UK, and then in the table next to us, we had a few friends from Asia, and we all looked together, looked up, and there was some random comedian. We didn't know who it was, but there was like 30 people around him asking for photos. Oh, wow. And I looked at my friend from the UK who I was on a meeting with. I'm like, do you guys know who this guy is? And they were like, no, you? I'm like, no, of course not. And then we looked at our friends who were sitting on the table over, who was right next to the guy. We were like, do you guys know who it is? And they were like, no, we don't know who it is either. I'm like, why are you taking photos of this guy? It was so funny. But none of us were able to figure it out until one of them asked him who he was, and we realized he had 8 million followers, happened to be a comedian, right? Yeah. And I'm like, wow, the impact. But the fact that we didn't know him, and it was 4 different countries all sitting at a table who didn't know who this guy was. I mean, it really shows how global this ecosystem. I think he was from the Middle East. He was a creator from the Middle East. It really shows how global this ecosystem really truly is.
It's one of those things where if you just let go and realize it is impossible to know all of the people and all the things, all the stuff, just focus on the niche you're working on and get good at that. It hopefully simplifies it, makes it a little bit easier. Yeah. Dylan, I really appreciate you doing this. Thanks again.
Thank you for having me. One last thing I want to bring up about 1 billion follower summit, just because I'm holding this in my hand right now. My dad before the trip, he gave me this like international plug and outlet to be able to use internationally, right? And I was like, great, yeah, I'm gonna use it. But I forgot I didn't ask him how to use it, right? So I always was like clicking this button right here, how I plug it in, and it wouldn't work. And I just yesterday realized I'm supposed to flick this up, and I never did that. So this entire time I wasn't able to charge my phone unless I put it in the charge it in the hotel room, because that was the only place where they had US outlets. So
This is a real thing for travel.
So the entire time I was out, I had this, but I didn't flick this up. So this was getting stuck, and this wasn't up. And yeah, I realized that now. I learned yesterday that that's how you do it.
This might be the most practical advice we've ever given. This is very important. Like, you don't want a dead phone when you're at
the number of times I had to go back to the hotel, charge my phone for 10 minutes, and almost be late to a speaker event twice.
I have gotten so good at, like, if I don't have, like, I'm inevitably, like, I'm a very distracted ADHD person. I'm going to forget those tools. I've just gotten really shameless at asking, like, anybody, do you have a place where I can charge my phone? I'm just going to leave it with you. I'm going to trust you completely.
We were at the closing ceremony, which insane fireworks. Dubai really went all out in the fireworks show. But the number of times I went around asking people, do you have a mobile charger I can borrow? Really saved me at the end.
Yeah. Yeah, you got to you just got to, use your resources. And, if anything...
I apparently had the resource, just not the acumen to know that I was supposed to flick this up.
It's finding ways... The takeaway here is finding ways to advocate for creators earlier in the process at brands and flick the switch. Just remember to flick the switch.
It's never too early to do that. I love it. Jeff, thank you for having me.